most important parts of the presentation process is when we reach that stage where we invite our audience to ask questions. If we don't make a good job of our discussion time, then the audience can walk away thinking, actually, that presentation wasn't too good. 3 very, very important things to do when you're preparing your presentation and thinking about how you're going to manage discussion. First of all, you've got to make sure that you play devil's advocate. Think about your audience, and again, remember, we're being audience-centred, we're not being presenter-centred here. We're thinking about the group of people we're presenting to, and we're thinking about bearing in mind that group of people, bearing in mind the type of people they are, the areas in which they work, their levels of expertise, levels of experience. What sort of questions are they going to ask me? It's a great feeling when an audience member asks you a question and says, and you asks you that question, and you can say to yourself, I know exactly how to deal with that question. So the trick here is to make sure that you pause, that you really give value to the question and you give value to the questioner before you start your answer. In that way, it makes it look like it wasn't an easy question, that you really did have to think about it. Then it's very important, secondly, to think about some tactics. One of the most important tactics is to think about the different questioner types that you may have or be faced with, and how to deal with those questioner types. So for instance, you might get somebody who asks a multiple question. Well, how do you deal with it? How do you deal with it in a positive, professional way? You might get somebody who asks what you think is an irrelevant question. How are you going to respond to that? And what do you do if you get somebody who asks an aggressive question? And as we all know, aggressive questioners can sometimes be quite hard to deal with. And we, again, can give you a lot of help, a lot of tools, a lot of strategies to enable you to do just that. Final thing is about control. How do we control our audience? Now, one of the things that can really go wrong in question time, especially if you have a big audience, is a lack of control. Now, one of the most important things to do to help avoid that is to control our audience through eye contact. The natural reaction when we get asked a question is to look at the person who's asked the question, to listen to them, and then to deliver the answer directly to that person. Now, that's great for the person who's asked the question, but it's not so good for everybody else. So the trick here is to make sure that everybody gets eye contact, so that everybody feels as if it's them that's asked the question. Then the other point about control is to do with what happens if you get somebody who really won't let go. I often refer to these people as the Jack Russell, the person who keeps coming back, asking you another question, maybe monopolising question time at the expense of other people who don't get any airtime. One of the worst things you can do with a person like that is look at them. So let's imagine you deal with their question and you think, right, that's enough now, I'm going to move to other people within the audience. One of the things that you've got to be really careful of is not to keep looking at them, because by looking at them, you give them permission to ask another question. So by cutting the eye contact, you effectively say, in very strong body language terms, that's enough, I'm not going to deal with any more of your questions. It really, really does work.